To Sticky Notes, a 15-minute learning session every other Friday where we share something that we feel may be interesting to other people. Today, we will diverge from UX to discuss the climate crisis. We hear a lot about this, but it can be an overwhelming, complicated, and confusing topic, and it's one that you often hear the same things about over and over again. So I asked all of you to send me your climate questions so we can cover some different topics than we would normally discuss. So we'll go ahead and get started, and I've got a lot to go through in 15 minutes. So one of the most commonly asked questions that I got was, what is a digital carbon footprint? So carbon footprints are useful for measuring impact because they give people a metric for improving. So you can have a positive trajectory and feel good about your actions. Metrics help focus our attention on outcomes, and we need goals because we naturally focus on the here and now, which I'll come on to in a little bit. But a digital carbon footprint is a number of carbon emissions generated by an individual or organization's digital activities, such as the internet, electronic devices, and online services. It includes the energy consumption and associated greenhouse gas emissions from the production, use, and disposal of digital devices, and the energy required to power data centers, networks, and other digital infrastructure. Activities contributing to a digital carbon footprint include streaming videos, sending emails, using social media, online shopping, and cloud computing, and other things. The use of data centers, which store and process large amounts of digital data, is also a major contributor to digital carbon footprints. So you can think of things like the cloud or Bitcoin servers. Reducing your digital carbon footprint can be achieved through various measures, such as choosing energy efficient devices using renewable energy sources to power digital infrastructure, reducing the time spent on digital activities, and properly disposing of electronic devices. So organizations can offset their digital carbon footprint by investing in renewable energy projects or purchasing carbon credits. So things like turning off your video for online meetings, reducing the number of emails you send daily, reducing the amount of storage you have on the cloud, and a 4-day work week are all being shown to help reduce digital carbon footprints. You can use a lot of online calculators to calculate your carbon footprint, both in like your daily life and your digital life. And you can use these to identify areas of your life where you can reduce your impacts on the environment. So you can find those on Google. Okay. The next one is recycling and plastics and how well it's recycled. So the rate of recyclability of plastics has a lot of dependencies, including what county you live in, how well you clean out your recycled packaging before disposing of it, and if your clean packaging is contaminated by dirty recycling. So fun fact, the entire truckload of recycling, if it's contaminated with batteries or any dirty recycling, all of it gets disposed of and not recycled. Generally speaking, you're better off reducing your consumption than reusing stuff before you recycle. So using recycling is your absolute last resort. And removing plastic packaging helps this, but it's not a guarantee either. So for example, sometimes glass can actually be harder to recycle than plastic. Plastic is something that people interact with every day. So it makes sense that people see that and think that that's an easy area in their life where they can reduce their impact, which it is to an extent, but you want to take that one step further and ask yourself, do you actually need that thing before you buy it? Because overconsumption is a really big reason why we're in the situation we're in now. So you want to think, do I actually need this thing? Can I reuse this? And if it's no, you might want to rethink buying it. But I have to say that that's a privilege to be able to do that. Because climate change disproportionately affects those who suffer from socioeconomic inequalities. So not everybody gets to have that luxury of choosing between an eco-friendly product and something that's a cheaper alternative or different type of packaging. So appreciate that if you're able to do that, because a lot of people can't do that. You can go to recyclenow.com for more information about recycling. Okay. I also got some questions about everyday things. Do they still have an impact? Like, what can we do in the everyday that still matters? And the good news is that your actions still have impact and are still worth doing. So here's some things you could do. I don't know how much time we got, but whatever. So moving your pension Moving your pension to ethical green funds only is a huge thing that you can do. So you will be taking your invested pension directly away from fossil fuel driven companies, which might be partaking in illegal activities like illegal logging and stuff like that, and moving it to companies that in theory should not be doing that kind of stuff. So that's a massive impact that you can have. Compost your food waste and eat your leftovers. So this will reduce methane emissions, which are more harmful than CO2, by removing waste from landfills. And they estimate something about 6 to 8% of all human-caused greenhouse gas emissions could be reduced if we stopped wasting food. So composting also helps reduce erosion and replenishes nutrients within the soil that then goes into your food. And it also helps the soil retain water, so it ends up saving water as well. Norwich City, I don't know about the county, but the city itself provides a really good scheme for this and makes it super easy to be able to compost from your house. Let's see what else. So unplug, switch off at the wall appliances when you're not using them. The cost of living in the UK has highlighted this a lot in terms of saving money, but just flicking the switch on the wall will help those appliances not use as much electricity when they're not in use. So things like game consoles, charge cords, stuff like that, just like when you're not using them, to turn them off. Wash your clothes in the cold water setting will save electricity. It's also better for your clothing. It'll prolong their life, thus reducing how quickly they get to landfill. Repair, mend, or buy secondhand where possible so you can stop your contribution to the supply chain. Eat meat free 2 or 3 days a week, or at least skip beef a few days a week. Beef has the worst carbon footprint of all the kind of protein sources, like animal proteins, and contributes to a lot of bad things, including like a lot of deforestation. But so does soy, so you might want to limit your consumption of soy also. You try to hang dry your clothing instead of using a dryer when you can. Turn off your water when you're like brushing your teeth, doing dishes, that kind of stuff, to can save water. Water is not an unlimited resource. So yeah, that needs to, yeah. So, but it's also worth saying that you do not need to live a completely zero waste lifestyle. So you just want to choose areas in your life where you can make a change and do that consistently, but don't be so hard on yourself if you're not able to like do every single thing possible, because it's just not possible. So another question I got was, should countries be aligned for global impact / is it even worth still doing anything? So this is a hard, complicated one to answer. So I'm just going to kind of break this down a bit. So we'll quickly look at why it's hard for people to make faster aligned action on climate change. Climate change is difficult for many people to grasp because our brains are not wired for long-term threats. So we can duck a ball in milliseconds because that's how we're hardwired. Loss aversion is another shortcoming that people have, where many of us are more afraid of losing what we want in the short term than surmounting obstacles in the distance. Our built-in optimism bias irrationally projects sunny days ahead. And despite the evidence to the contrary. And to compound all of that, we tend to seek out information, not to gain knowledge for its own sake, but to support our already established viewpoints. So you have that. Next, you have all kinds of complicated politics, agendas, and opposing ideologies from those in a position who are able to do the most for the situation that we're in. And this stuff is so entrenched, it really does go back to colonial times. So it's very, very, very difficult to get that changed. And individuals also have a cognitive bias towards instant gratification, and pushing organizations to short-termism, example, pay as little as possible and don't invest in long-term strategies, is also a huge challenge. But there has been much wider acceptance and action over the last decade than I've seen in my whole life as someone who cares very deeply about this kind of stuff. So that long-term threat is now appearing more imminent, which is spurring more people to want to do something. And it's getting more serious media coverage, which more than it has done in the past. And that goes a long way in impacting how people feel and think about topics. So in short, all countries do need to be aligned with efforts to reduce the impact and avoid the ultimately horrible catastrophe that it could be. While we know that's a tall order, that does not mean that more efforts from some countries over others or individual actions don't make a difference, because they do. So actions accumulate and help to drive down the worst possible outcome. So just imagine how much worse the situation would be if nobody did anything ever for the last 50 years. No one did a single thing. This would be like probably game over, right? I mean, I don't know, like might be. But so all the actions that we take every day do accumulate and add up to kind of reduce the worst effects. So all is not lost. I promise. Some positives have been happening. I've gone through and compiled a list of some of the ones that have come out over the past year or so. So I'll just quickly run through them. So in September 2022, the billionaire owner of Patagonia transferred his ownership of Patagonia, which is valued at about $3 billion, to a specially designed trust and nonprofit organization. So they were created to preserve the company's independence and ensure that all of its profits, which are about $100 million a year, are used to combat climate change and protect undeveloped land around the globe, which is incredible. And is an amazing example of a billionaire who's doing something useful with his money, because not all billionaires do things useful with their money. Other good things that have happened recently: heat pumps avoided 8 million tons of CO2 emissions in Europe last year. Renewable energy is to become the world's top source of electricity by 2025. Australia has blocked a proposal for a new coal mine near the Great Barrier Reef. Beavers are being reintroduced to London and elsewhere in England. I don't know if it's all the UK, but and they might be able to protect the local train stations from flooding because they're actually a natural, yeah. Companies will soon have to prove that they actually really are taking care of the climate action under draft EU law. Portugal is trading Cape Verde's national debt for climate investments, which is really cool. And it's becoming more profitable to fight climate change rather than costly, as it has been in the past. So, and as we all know, money talks. So this is a great incentive for huge corporations and companies to start kind of cleaning themselves up. There's new ways, a lot of really cool science and discovery stuff's going on. So there's new ways of storing carbon, including storing in rocks, concrete, under seabeds, etc., as well as new materials to replace things like leather. So seafood waste, for example, could be a leather replacement. There's tons of good stuff going on. You can always check out dailyclimate.org/good/news for positive news stories regarding climate action. And this stuff is really bleak, so it's important to kind of keep the positive. You want to keep a balance, otherwise it can kind of bury you down, and then you're not proactive. So in conclusion, okay, I got like 3 minutes. In conclusion, the aim isn't perfection. It's anything that you can do in your daily life will help. Consider candidates' climate policies when you're choosing who to vote for, no matter how big the election or small it is. And if you take nothing away from today, please take this. Do not underestimate your power as a consumer. Companies are ambivalent. They will change to accommodate whatever you want so they can keep taking your money. So email, phone, tweet, boycott, and stop buying from companies if you're privileged enough to do so, if you don't like what they're doing and you don't think they're doing enough to contribute to fixing the climate crisis. So that's it. Thank you for listening. And tune in. Wait, do I not do my ending yet? Should I do questions?
Yeah, can you?
Do I do questions first?
Can I have
okay,
questions?
Yeah. Okay, questions.
Okay.
And then I'll do my ending.
Right, really quickly. So if you're an employer that sets people up on Nest pensions, which is what we have at the user story, you can, as an employee, configure where your pension then gets invested within Nest. Interestingly, I just looked it up now. Nest, by default, do invest you in some ethical funds.
Oh, that's new.
Which is really good.
Yeah.
Interestingly as well, the ethical funds perform better than any of the other funds available within Nest.
Yeah.
So actually, if you invest more money into that part of your, your pension pot into the ethical fund, you're actually going to also do better. So do that. That's a really good thing. And it's also like free. You can just go on and change it where your money's invested.
Yeah, so that's what I've done with mine. Use Nest.
Yeah, there you go. My question was about carbon credits. You mentioned carbon credits.
Yeah.
I have no idea what carbon credits are. Are they the same as like carbon offsetting? Is that the same thing?
I think so. I mean, I had to research it more, to be honest. But yeah, I think they kind of operate something similar, but I can look that up after this and then tell you for sure.
And my sort of follow-up question about offsetting is, how much of an impact does offsetting have? Because surely what you're doing is you're kind of doing the bad stuff and then you're just like paying someone else to do something good. Does it actually have that much of an impact? Like if you offset a flight, for example, you're still taking the flight, which is like obviously really polluting and carbon emitting. What's the benefit of offsetting that? Does it actually help?
I think some programs probably does actually help. And then I think it depends what the offset program is and how that trickles down through the offsetting measures that they're using.
Okay.
I'll have to also, that's like a whole separate, but I
Yeah.
can give you more information about that after also.
Cool. Okay.
But yeah, it depends on who's doing it and the program that they're using, basically. I think I'm at time now.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Any questions or anything?
Any other questions?
I've got one question that's quite big.
Okay. Oh, okay.
I can ask you later if you want.
Well, you can ask it real quick, and then I'll probably say I'll have to tell you later. But it might be. I don't know.
What's the biggest factor in contributing to change at the moment? Is it like state intervention or changing market forces?
I mean, it's just on my opinion, but I would say it needs to be huge, just like really wide organizational change with companies and with government policy. Individual action alone isn't enough anymore. It does need to be really, really huge, like agriculture, like all this kind of stuff does need to be changed on a really, really wide scale very quickly. People have been talking about this for 50 years. There's not really any excuse for it to be in this position anymore, but here we are. But it does need to be a wider, but that doesn't negate your actions as an individual, which is why it's really important to pressure these companies, and they will change.
It's all about where the money goes.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you for listening, and tune in on the 10th of March for our next session that will be hosted by our superstar, Sammy. Remember, you are beautiful just for being you. Have a wonderful day.
Hey,